Hey guys, my name is Jayaprakash Bojan. I'm a nature, wildlife and conservation photographer, filmmaker. Hopefully today's session is a fun session, and I'm hoping at the end of 1 hour, at least some of you will be inspired to go out and take some pictures irrespective of what camera you have with you right now. Okay, I have a lot of pictures to show you over the next 1 hour, so I'm going to try and quickly jump into the slides. Okay, so what is the best camera that I can buy to take pictures? This is like probably one of the most common questions I get on my social media pages, or when I'm traveling overseas, or even in a place like Pastor's Park where I shoot and film a lot of time. Well, there is really no best camera in the world. The best camera in the world is the camera you have right now in your hand. This is a very cliche response. I'm sure you heard this a million times, but it is actually true. So doesn't matter what camera you have, you can still take amazing pictures with even a mobile phone that you have in your hand right now. Cool. So here are some shots that I took with a mobile phone. This is a starfish at Pastor's Park. Here's another shot of a dragonfly on a spider web. Here's another insect. Okay, so this is one of those mobile phone pictures which got very viral in Singapore. This was actually taken in Pastor's Park with an iPhone. After I show you some more pictures, I'll probably give you a few tips on how you can take better pictures with mobile phones. While I continue to show some of the other pictures. So this was approximately 7 a.m. in the morning, just around the time it was sunrise. Here's a little beautiful image of a mudskipper. Mudskippers are very tiny as 2 to 3 centimeters in size, but you can see, it's an image shot on a mobile phone. Okay, not many people believe me when I say this was actually shot on a mobile phone. Probably a few years ago, a mobile phone company actually flew me down to South Africa, and we spent almost a week taking pictures only with a mobile phone. I didn't carry any of my expensive equipments. We did this for a mobile phone campaign and a launch. So this was again one early morning during sunrise. Show you a few more examples of pictures taken with mobile phones. Here's another example. This is an image that I took at Pastor's Park here in Singapore. This is one of my favorite images of a crab just coming out of its home early morning during sunrise at Pastor's Park. Yeah, that's a picture of a mushroom. And something you see most people do these days, right? I mean, if you're flying on a plane, you take some shots through your window of the aeroplane for your Instagram stories or Facebook stories. Okay. So this is very interesting. What you see on the slides right now are probably some of the most obvious ones that you already know, right? Keep your lenses clean. Set your focus when you're taking a picture with your mobile phone. Keep your horizon straight. Rule of third, right? Rule of third. I'm sure everybody's heard of rule of third. Okay, hope you guys can hear me better now. Embrace negative spaces. We'll talk about what it means later on. Play with reflections, shoot eye level, use HDR. All cameras have an HDR function. You can just go to your settings, choose camera, and then you will find something called HDR, and go ahead and switch it on. And set exposure manually, right? Again, probably all of you are thinking, we already know all of this stuff. Why is he even talking about some of these very fundamental basic stuff? But the challenge I see with most of us as photographers is there's a difference between knowing and applying them when you're actually taking photographs, okay? So there's a big difference, right? We know all of this stuff, but how much of this we actually use in terms of application when we're actually taking a photograph? Not many of us. Okay, so a lot of people ask me questions like, I'm a beginner, I want to get into some serious photography, what kind of equipment I should buy? Well, fortunately or unfortunately, these days, equipment is all largely budget driven.
There's a camera and there's an equipment depending on the budget you want to spend. That doesn't mean there are bad or good cameras. It's purely up to us. So for beginners, for example, I would suggest a 70-200 or a 300mm lens will be ideal if you want to pick up wildlife photography or bird photography or mammal photography in a little more serious manner. What lenses do I buy? Probably some of the cheapest lenses in the market are Sigma lenses. So third-party lenses made for pretty much all the major camera manufacturers in the world today. So, you should probably look at Sigma lenses. There are also bridge cameras, some amazing bridge cameras these days, like the Nikon P1000, Sony RX10. These are some cameras that can actually do very, very serious photography with. And these are not very big, heavy cameras, tiny cameras, but still produce unbelievably amazing images. Some of them can even compete with some of the more expensive cameras. Okay, so now this session is not going to be a very technical session. There are a lot of YouTube videos. You can go and learn how to set your ISO, your exposure triangle, all of the settings, right? Usually people think that's the hardest part. But your ability to use a camera to take pictures is the easiest of the whole process of taking photography. And you will probably see why. So what I'm going to do this time is a little different from the usual sessions you're used to listening, where you talk about all the settings and stuff like that. So I thought it'll be more fun to see what would it be like if you had to dig into a photographer's head to understand how a photographer thinks. Because some of these amazing pictures are not really made just because they had some good equipment or they're in the right place at the right time. There's more to it than some of these aspects that I spoke about. So I'm going to talk a little bit about photography and storytelling. Most of us probably don't realize what we're doing with a lot of our photographs is basically telling stories with our photographs, right? Some of them often debate with me saying, how is it possible? How can you tell a story with every picture you take, right? That's a question, most frequently asked question I get. But I'll explain how and why it works. So you can already see there are some words on the slides. I don't want to read all of that, but just give you a sense of some of my thoughts that I put on the slides, right? Unless you're in the field of photojournalism, most photographs don't really say a story, right? Photographs that make us pause, make us take a second look, have already set the stage for the viewer. So for example, you're browsing through millions of images on Instagram or Facebook these days, right? All of us. But there are times when you stop, when you look at certain pictures and you spend more time on those pictures. Or some of those pictures made you take a second look at those pictures. What you don't realize is those pictures actually did something to you. There was some kind of an emotional connect between those pictures and you. Is primarily the reason why you stopped and spend more time on those pictures. So the next question is, how do you take pictures like that can actually impress your audience? It's easier said than done, right? As a photographer, I only have a few seconds of my viewer's time to impress him, because there are already millions of images out there thrown out by some amazing photographers out there. So how do I catch my audience attention in those few minutes? So all these things that I'm going to talk about now applies irrespective of what kind of camera you're using, or you're using a mobile phone or an expensive camera. It really doesn't matter, okay? So, and I also believe this is a recorded session, and it'll also be available on YouTube later on. So just in case, if the topic is a little heavy and if you're not able to catch up with me, you have the option to go back and listen to the recording later on, okay? Moving on from there, setting the stage, okay? So I said, when you actually take a picture, basically all you're doing is setting the stage for the viewer to imagine his own story from the picture you put out there. And how does it work? So these are some random thoughts in my mind. A picture is worth 1,000 words. You heard this a million times. Open and close stories. We'll talk about it moving forward. Capturing emotions, right? Evoke strong emotions in your viewer's mind. How do you do that? Colors. What impact does colors have on a viewer's mind? Keen observation and understanding animal behavior is key to storytelling. This is probably one of the most fundamental requirements to be a good photographer, especially if you want to be a nature and wildlife photographer, right? Keen observation and understanding animal behavior is key to storytelling. A lot of people tell you, right, be original, your photograph should have your personality. You should have your creativity, right? I mean, it should have a little bit of your touch. What does all this mean? Keep visual distraction to a minimum when you want to highlight a specific subject. The eyes, I often talk about the eyes. The eyes are the windows to the soul. You've probably seen it or heard of these words before. Wildlife is intimate. Personally for me, when I'm shooting wildlife, it's an intimate interaction between me and the animal that I'm filming or shooting, right? Now the question is, how do I translate that intimacy between me and my subject into my pictures? Feel is important. For me, if a photograph doesn't have any feel or emotion or mood in them, the photograph is as good as a dead photograph. Yeah, it could be the most beautiful picture on earth, but the photograph isn't actually doing anything with your audience, right? So how do you bring in feel? How do you bring in mood? How do you bring in these aspects into your photography? Be creative. I'm sure you've heard this a million times again. Experiment with light, right? I mean, the very basic meaning of a photograph is painting with light, right? If you go and look at the original Egyptian explanation of what photography means, is painting with light. If there's no light, there's no photograph, right? So your understanding of light makes a huge difference to how well your photographs turn out or how good a photographer you can become over a period of time. Fear of missing, especially for nature and wildlife photographers, fear of missing is a big, big challenge, especially if you're a beginner. Most importantly, I'm sure you all have heard of composition guidelines. People talk about 6 steps to composition, 10 steps, 15 steps, 20 steps. Yeah, there are loads of composition guidelines, like using the rule of third, finding patterns and stuff like that. But the bottom line is there are really no rules, right? It's really up to you as the creator to create what you want. And there is an audience for every photograph in the world today. Okay. So in my previous slide, I spoke something about open stories and closed stories, right? I mean, just give you an idea of what I mean by open stories and closed stories. So these are, I mean, you can call them trade secrets. I mean, this is not something most photographers share, or, it's not something that we usually share. So that's why I wanted to do something different in this session, right? So what's a closed story, right? For example, this is one of my favorite pictures. This is how I saw my first tiger that I ever photographed in the wild. So usually when I put this picture out, most of my viewers or my audience, they're really not sure what this is. They think that is an animal, they're really not sure, they have a lot of questions in their mind. So that's what I mean when I say it's an open story. In the sense, it's, as a viewer, when you see a picture like this, you're going to have like a million thoughts, a million questions. So you're really not sure what it is. So you're going to make up your own story through what you have experienced in your own life, right? All of our perceptions, all of the ideas that come in our mind are nothing but an assimilation of who we are and where we grew up, and it's a combination of so many of those factors, which will have a direct impact on how you respond to a certain picture or how you react to a certain picture. Here's an example of a storytelling image. This is something that I photographed in Kalimantan in Borneo. So here are some examples. Okay, so I have a lot of slides. I'm not going to talk through all the slides. I'm going to, sometimes I'll be flipping through some slides, so you're not bored just listening to my voice, and you're also looking at some pictures. Now I want to just move to some stories in Singapore. A few years ago, a very big company here in Singapore was doing an eco conference. So they asked me if I could do some pictures that talks about coexistence, right? Coexistence means coexisting between how in a city like Singapore we coexist with wild animals. Right? So that was the gist of what they asked me to do, right? So it's not just going and taking some beautiful pictures. So I had to go back to the drawing board and really see how I could bring a topic like this in the form of pictures for an exhibition we did. So here are some of the pictures that I took, which kind of symbolizes coexistence in a place like Singapore, right? A hornbill and a cycle park there. You see a monitor lizard is actually resting on a tree on a bridge, and at the background you actually see a Singapore bus, which is, I mean, everybody recognizes the bus, so that's how you know it's Singapore. It's a reflection of a Singapore bus on a little river, and there's a grey heron there. I mean, this is probably one of the simplistic pictures, most frequently seen pictures in Singapore. Otters. Early morning, I saw, this family of otters and passeres hanging around the fringes of the sea, and then there were these two uncles who were jogging in the morning. And the interesting fact was, they kind of went down on their knees and were trying to take pictures of the otters. And it was almost like the otters obliged for a photograph. The otters were so curious. All of them walked up towards them, and they were looking up to them. This is quite a common scene here in Singapore. Here are some examples of shots that are taken on the port. Observation is the key to storytelling, right? Keen observation. So remember, observation is the key. So as a photographer, it doesn't matter whether you're a mobile phone photographer or a serious photographer. If you can apply some of these concepts, it'll make a huge difference to how your pictures turn out. So this is a simple example. The heron that is there on this bridge that I see every day is a very smart heron. So what it does is, while all the other herons are on the other side of the park, trying hard to find fishes, so this smart little heron actually goes and stands on this huge pipe when the water is flowing back during low tides, and it waits for those little fishes which kind of flow over the little pipe and fall into the other side of the river. So it's like a perfect spot for him to hunt. So this is a slow shutter shot. I mean, you can create even more interesting images in a place like this. So observation is the key, right? As a wildlife filmmaker, photographer, the more you know of your habitat, the more you know of the animal behavior, where to find what. Almost all mammals, all birds, just like us, have their favorite chair, favorite table to sit and eat on, favorite place they come every morning. So the more you spend time, the more you start understanding some of these things, your photography just becomes better and better over time. Here's another example of how you can take pictures that have some stories, right? Especially if you're in a nature reserve, close to nature reserves, you want to be careful when you're driving, you don't want to drive fast because there could be a lot of animals crossing. So everything that I said through words right now is what basically the picture represents, right? That's what I mean when I say storytelling, right? A simple example would be, I could have taken a nice shot of the snake, right? With my camera phone, right? Just go close and take a beautiful shot. It would just be a shot of a snake. That's it. But all you had to do is to add all those other elements in the scene, right? There's a jeep coming in the background, right? Go slightly wide, go down to eye level, and you can see how it's no longer just a picture of a snake, but there's a story to it, right? So, end of the day, it's all about how you can transform your thinking from just taking everything that you see to taking that extra little time and few seconds to think, to see, how can I transform an ordinary picture into something more important or something that has a story. Here's another example. This is another picture I did for an exhibition where we were talking about coexistence. I think the topic was around can development and nature coexist? Right? That's a topic. Somebody tells you, hey, can you go out and shoot some pictures which talks about can a country like Singapore, where there's a lot of development, actually coexist with nature, right? That's a topic somebody gave you to go and take a picture. Now, how do you take that topic and bring that topic in the form, or bring life to that topic in the form of a picture? So here's an example of how you can do it, right? So it's a lot of it is basically not really about the camera and the equipment and all of the stuff. Trust me, it's all about your thought process as a photographer, how you think and how you can conceptualize and bring some ideas to life. The eyes is the windows to the soul. Like I said, you've heard this a million times. Here are some few examples. Eye contact with the wild animal is very, very powerful. Most wild animals hate eye contact with humans. So usually they will try and avoid eye contact with you. If you're a photographer, you get very few chances to actually capture that eye contact. So the more you understand the animal and the animal's behavior, you have a better chance of getting those shots on time, because now you can anticipate better, right? The more you know about them, it improves your anticipation. So you know what the animal could be doing next. So you're in a better position to actually take better pictures. So here are some examples of eye contact with animals. Here's an example of deliberate composition, right? For example, this leopard was actually walking in the open, and I was sitting in a Jeep. So I could have got a very nice shot of, a full clear shot of the leopard. But in my mind, that's a boring picture, right? So in my mind, I'm thinking, I want to take a picture where when somebody looks at the picture, they get a sense of the animal is watching from behind the trees, or from behind the leaves, right? That's the story, right? So that's an idea I have in my mind. Now, how do I translate that idea into a picture? This is how. I did not take a picture of the leopard when the leopard was actually walking out in the open. I was waiting for him to go behind the bushes. Also, I knew how a leopard would behave. Leopards are like a typical cat, just like any other normal cat. They will walk a few steps, and if you're there, they'll turn around, give you a glimpse, again walk a few steps, turn around, give you a glimpse until they finally disappear. So I just had to wait for the right time to get this shot. So all this relates to storytelling. I hope you're getting what I'm trying to explain in terms of how, there's a lot more thought process goes into taking pictures. It's not about, okay, you went to Africa, you saw something and you just shot, right? If you can put in a little more thought into your pictures, you can actually take your photography to another level altogether. This was my award-winning image with National Geographic. Here's an example of how I use my pictures to bring change, right? I do a lot of fundraising for saving the rainforest. This was an exhibition we did in Germany. You can see the size that was printed of my picture. It was almost the size of a 3-storied building. The idea was, it's like a conversation starter. So this was in Germany, right? They put up these huge pictures. So when people are just out there, they're all wondering, what is this orangutan doing, right? What is this strange creature, a huge picture? What is this picture about? So that's where the discussion starts, right? So people are curious. So now you have an opportunity to connect with people, to tell them the story behind what's happening in Borneo, the forests are being destroyed. So these are different ways of how photography can be a very, very powerful medium to tell stories, right? It doesn't matter whether you're capturing your newborn baby or your kids playing a football game, or it doesn't matter what. If you can just embrace the aspects of how I can bring the story aspect to your pictures, trust me, you can actually take your photography to another level altogether. These are some examples. This looks like a very simple, straightforward shot, but it took me almost 4 days to get this shot because I was trying to spend a lot of time with this wild creature, so he was comfortable enough with me. And he's completely relaxed to be able to give me this look. Here's an example of wild tigers. Different focal lengths can tell a different story, okay? A lot of people think wildlife photography means you need this huge, massive 600 mm, $20,000 lens to actually go out and shoot pictures. It's really not true. I always tell people, if you want to shoot birds, why are you chasing birds with a 50 mm lens, right? Wildlife is wildlife. For every focal length, there is a different subject to choose. You're probably chasing the wrong subjects with the wrong lens, right? So this is a 24 mm shot of a black-crested macaque from Indonesia. These are some images. These are some rare images. It's called a lion-tail macaque. Okay, so this is a mud skipper I shot in Pasir Park. Here's another example of getting the right shots. If you understand animal behavior, then you understand the animal's body language, so you know which pose you want to get and stuff like that. So it's not difficult. Another way of how photographers think is, how do I keep things minimalistic, right? Here are some examples of how minimalistic pictures can still be very powerful. Here's an example of how I was able to bring my intimate relationship with that animal when I'm actually taking a picture into the picture, right? So after several attempts and after spending a lot of time with this particular alpha male, I was able to capture this image of this alpha male. By the way, this is not in the zoo, in the wild. Colors, right? Colors have tremendous effect on your pictures. A lot of us as viewers, we don't even know that actually some of those colors in those pictures are actually the reason why you liked some of those pictures. Or some of those pictures made you cry because there was a lot of emotions in them. Colors do have an impact, and I will. There's a little explanation I put on the screen for you guys, right? The primaries are the building blocks of, as far as photography is concerned, right? Red, green, and blue, and the combination of these three will give you all the other colors. So they are also the basis of how camera senses, and how the whole pixel technology actually works. Okay. Usually tones of blue gives you a sense of cold. For example, this room is really cold right now. Yellows usually give you a sense of warmth. So once you have an understanding of some of these colors and how these colors actually play an effect, you can actually use your understanding of these colors and embrace it and kind of use it in your photographic journey to tell your stories. Okay, this is how I like to shoot my birds. A little tip, right? How a typical photographer thinks, right? For example, what goes on in my mind, right? When I'm taking pictures, I'm constantly thinking, can I actually put this picture on the wall of my house? Trust me, when you start thinking like that as a photographer, what you're going to shoot is going to be absolutely different from what everybody would be doing, right? Because I sell a lot of pictures. I do a lot of exhibitions. So I'm in my mind constantly thinking when I'm actually clicking photographs in the wild, can I put this on the wall of my house, or can I put this on the wall of on an exhibition, or can I put this on the wall of somebody else's house, right? The minute you start thinking, so it's all about your thought process, right? It's really not about the equipment, and you will see how your photographs will transform into something absolutely different. And I'll give you examples of what I mean, right? So here are basically some images with colors. This is an owl I shot in Pasir Ris Park. You can see typically on a cold early mornings, your photographs will have a tinge of blue in them because of the weather conditions and the mist and things like that. Okay, habitat. Habitat is important. For example, these are all habitat shots, not shot with long lenses, but you can see all taken somewhere in the range of 20 to 100 mm lenses. Sometimes when I'm in a place, as a photographer, as I'm a storyteller, I want to also show you what I saw. Most of the time what we show you is not what we saw, what we took through our cameras. So sometimes it's important for me to take my audience through my photographs to the location where I am, right? So you can see how pictures can be different, right? This is the picture I actually shared on Facebook. But this picture that you see is the actual habitat. So it's important to take those habitat shots as well, so you kind of give your audience a feel of where you are. These are some images. Perspective. Perspective is important. It's a very, very interesting concept, right? What do I mean perspective? This example talks about perspective. I was always thinking, if I was a crab, how would my view of the world look like if I was a crab, or somebody shrunk me into the size of a crab? And then how would my view of the world look like from a crab standpoint? See, that's an idea now, right? Now you take this idea and see how you can bring this idea to life. So that's what I was trying with this picture that you see on your screen today. So photography is all about your thought process, your ability to compose and stuff like that, right? This is an example of chaos, right? Even chaos could be beautiful. I mean, it's just a mess out there in Africa sometimes, but even chaos is beautiful. Intimacy, light is interesting, right? Typical photography, if you go for a training session in a studio setup, they will say light has to be behind you, light has to fall on the subject, but break the rules. You can shoot against the light and see the kind of images you can make, right? You can actually see the breath of the cheetah. These are some shots from Japan. You can see the breath of the bird out there. These are some examples of how just breaking the rules can give you more interesting pictures, right? That's a kingfisher in the morning in the river. So this is how typically all newcomers will shoot, right? Especially in the Singapore context, right? You're so crazy about details, so everybody wants to go as close as possible to a bird, get all the details. It's great. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But as you mature, your thinking will start changing. So these are the traditional shots people would shoot, right? I mean, this is how. So for example, this is how most of us shoot. But You see how a picture can transform if you can just take all those other aspects into the picture. I actually sold many prints of this picture that you see on the wall right now, versus something like this, which a lot of us see on Facebook today, right? So, just the thinking will, take you a long way. So I'm just going to browse through some pictures in the interest of time. Another example of perspective. This shot was actually taken on a GoPro. I will tell you how I took this shot. There you see. I bought a cheap remote control car from one of the malls here in Singapore. I actually put a GoPro. It's very difficult to get very close to these macaques. So in my mind, now I have an idea that I want a wide angle shot of these macaques. Now, how do I bring this idea to life, right? So photography is all about experimentation. It's about your thought process, how you can go and think out of the box to create something new, right? On a boring day in the Singapore Zoo, this is what I made. Looks amazing on the wall of a house. It's just patterns, right? It's a reflection of a elephant in the river. Mood is important. A lot of us I see when we take pictures, when we especially edit, we like to bring all the details out. So we will go and brighten the pictures, remove all the shadows. Don't do that. It's the shadows, the light, the mix of all that, the little bit of darkness in the image is what brings the mood in those pictures. You don't have, everything need not be crystal clear all the time. It's boring. Here are some examples from Japan. Okay, sunrise and sunset story. Sunrise and sunset, you don't have to do anything. There is a story in itself. These are all pictures I took in Pasir Ris Park. A secret location of mine. It's no longer a secret. We have some of the best sunrises in Pasir Ris Park. If you're ever there, try and get there before sunrise and you'll be amazed at the kind of pictures you can take in Pasir Ris Park. All of these shots are taken in Pasir Ris Park. Of course, this is not Pasir Ris, this is Africa. So, sunrise and sunset, if you can wake up early and be there, you can get some amazing shots.
So right now we're going to the Q&A segment. So thank you so much for sharing. I think that was really great. And we do see quite a few questions over here. So yes, you can stand right here beside me. And I'm going to share. Oh, okay, great. So here are some of the questions. The first question is for you. It's which wildlife animal photo you took in Singapore that left the most impression on you?
Wow, it's a very hard one. I mean, otters are one of the most highly debated topics in Singapore, but definitely otters.
Otters, but they are also really cute. Right.
Yeah, they're cute, but a lot of people make the mistake of getting close to them is when we have some challenges. So it's best to keep a distance from otters.
Okay, right. Then okay. So the next question is: do you set the story first and find a scene to fit it, or vice versa, or both?
Combination of both. The reason I say combination of both is because before I go to a location, I do my research. Usually I go and see the kind of photographs already taken in the location, because I'm thinking as a photographer, why do I want to waste time and go and take the same kind of pictures that other people have already taken, right? Why can't I be a little more creative? So that kind of gives me a baseline of the work that's already been done in a location. So from there, I see how I can create something new. That's one way of doing. The other way of doing is, if you can embrace some of these concepts that I actually gave you, when you're on the location, and even if you see something randomly just appear, you can still use some of those ideas and concepts to see how you can bring a new perspective to the picture. So that's the idea.
Actually, sometimes it's also about like being on the spot, and then you spot something that give you the inspiration.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Great.
A simple example would be just moving 2 steps to the left or 2 steps to the right while taking the picture could either make or break the picture.
See.
So even just positioning yourself in the right place just around the subject could actually make a huge impact to the picture, or just going down to the eye level, or just trying to find the right angle could make a big difference.
But okay, I mean, just find my knowledge. I mean, on the topic of this, right? Animal moves very fast, right? So, I mean, in that spot, to get an instinct, right? So really, you just have to quickly take and then just move.
So that's what I talk about the fear of missing, right? When usually what most people who just started wildlife photography do is, oh, there's a bird, right? You quickly want to take your camera and take some shots because you're worried the bird is going to fly away. But trust me, right? That's not the end of your photography journey, right? It's all right, take those extra few seconds to understand the habitat, to see what's the direction of the light. Maybe if I stand there on the left, maybe I will get a better angle of the picture. It's okay if you miss a few shots. But just trying to practice some of these best practices will definitely make you a better photographer. And if you're a newcomer, the sooner you start, the better it is, because it's hard to get rid of bad habits. So the sooner you start practicing some of these fundamentals, the better photographer you become over a period of time.
I thought that was a good tip, and I think practice makes perfect.
Oh,
I think,
absolutely, yeah.
Okay, the next question is, what is the longest duration you have waited to capture a good shot?
Well, a few months ago, for example, my award-winning orangutan shot took me 3 days before I actually got the shot. We actually lived on a speedboat for 3 days, eating noodles and having coffee, just floating on a river in Borneo, completely away from the civilization. There's another in one of the recent videos that we did in Pasir there was a sequence where 2 mudskippers are fighting each other. That took me about 4-5 years before I actually got the sequence. It was very hard to get the timing right and get close to them and stuff like that. Yeah.
See, okay, so I mean, the next question is interesting. So I think equipment is also very important. So actually this audience is asking, can you recommend which smartphone brand is best for wildlife photography?
Well, I really know. Yeah, it comes back to the same one, right? I mean, it depends on what you can afford, trust me. The new generation Android phones and the iPhones, I mean, like the new iPhones are like pretty much a poor man's production camera. You can actually do production level, videos with those cameras these days.
Like iPhone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of us, what do we do with our photographs or our videos today, right? It's all predominantly all of us use it for social media. Unless you're shooting for Netflix or some high production, it really doesn't matter, right? Because one of the most expensive, a picture taken with one of the most expensive cameras on a Facebook will look pretty much the same as the one taken with an iPhone or your basic phone. I mean, it's not going to make a big difference, right? Because even platforms like Facebook and Instagram, they all compress your images. So.
Cool. All right. The next question is, do you conduct classes?
When I have time, I occasionally do, but I'm also a member of the Singapore Photographic, the Photographic Society of Singapore. I've been with them for the last 7 years. It's probably one of the oldest photographic societies in Singapore. There are a lot of other photography forums. There's a nature photography club. Singapore has got some amazing photography clubs. You'll be amazed, right from all the way up to seniors to youngsters. There are all kinds of clubs, and it's an amazing community to be part of. Really helpful people who really care, especially with nature and wildlife. I do sessions. That was the primary question, but if you are interested in a lot of interesting sessions, you guys can become members of the Photographic Society of Singapore, and they have all kinds of sessions. We even have sessions where we teach seniors, very, very old seniors on mobile phone photography and stuff like that. So they can join the Photographic Society of Singapore.
So yeah, hear that. So guys can just sign up for it, and then you can find him over there. Now the next question is there a particular animal group that you'll be focusing on in the future? Love the photos of the orangutan walking in the water. Yeah, so yeah, what's your plan?
Well, I have so many places to travel to and so many more animals to see. I'm actually trying to work on a book on primates of Southeast Asia. We have some of the most highly endangered species of primates in Southeast Asia alone. Some of them are in very small numbers, as small as 50 to 100 across the the Vietnam-China border and so many other places across Southeast Asia. So really, really hard to find. So I've been on this journey over the last few years to try and capture them in the wild, and hopefully in the next year or two, hopefully if I'm able to capture all of them, I will probably end up having a book on the primates of Southeast Asia.
Oh, wow, that's really nice. So I think we can definitely look forward to that. I mean,
Hopefully.
you can
Hopefully.
actually catch him on his Instagram as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, then he will probably announce the news. So for people who want to take photos locally, are there any local photo taking locations do you recommend beside Pasir Ris Park?
Oh, absolutely. If you are specifically talking about nature and wildlife, pretty much every nature park in Singapore is just unbelievably amazing. I think the difference is nature and wildlife photography takes time. A lot of people would come to Pasir Ris Park in the morning one day in an entire month, and then they would message me and say, hey, JP, you showed all these amazing pictures of all these animals. How come I was in the park yesterday, I didn't see anything? So that's not how wildlife and nature photography works, right? Also, I realize a lot of us, when we come to the park, we come with this idea of letting go of all our worries at workplace. Oh, I have to send some slides to my boss, whatever, all your worries. We are actually in the park to actually enjoy the park. But what I realize is most of us are still so preoccupied when we are in the park, because of which I notice a lot of times you miss seeing these amazing creatures even though they are in plain sight. So you've got to really let go of everything when you're in a park, open your nose, ears, all your senses, and you'll be amazed at the number of things you will see.
And actually, that will also be a great spot to take a picture.
Absolutely, any nature park in Singapore, because we have a variety of species, and different species live in different parks.
Okay, talking about taking pictures in a park, right? Do you take pictures at night? And for that kind of night lights, any extra equipments that is required?
Well, we do take pictures of some animals in the night, but not for example, frogs and spiders. A lot of people do macro photography in the night because a lot of creatures are nocturnal in nature, so they only come out in the night. For example, owls. But not so much. I do some filming, but not so much. But yes, there are different tools, different kinds of cameras available to shoot in the night, of course, yes.
Great. Okay, this is interesting. How does a photographer keep oneself safe while taking photos?
That's a tough one, right? I mean, we talk about ethics in photography, especially wildlife photography. In fact, if you look at some of the incidents we've had in Singapore, like people got attacked by an otter or people got attacked by a wild boar, I can tell you 99.9% of the time we've spooked them, because of which they react that way. Usually they would avoid you. So there is really no magic formula of keeping yourself safe, but all I can say is keep yourself at a reasonable distance from the subject. Yeah.
I mean, I saw some of the photos you took. I think that you actually did a quite risky also move, right? But
well, it depends, right? So for example, some of us do, you see people like National Geographic and BBC, when you see the stories, you wonder how they do it, right? It comes with a lot of time and knowledge spent. We've spent so much of time to understand how the animal would behave, whether the animal is angry, whether the animal is nervous, how would a wild boar, for example, react when he's nervous. So that a lot goes into it. So there is a certain amount of risk we take. I mean, obviously in Singapore we have very stringent laws of what we can do and what we cannot, but there are times when we are doing some serious production work. We usually have some rangers, we have some extra support, we have some biologists, some scientists with us who have an understanding of how close you can go and stuff like that. But as far as possible, stay away lah.
Or keep a reasonable distance,
keep a reasonable
right?
distance,
Yeah. So I think the next question, actually, you have also just now answered about studying the behavior of the animal, which is very important because then you will know when to react appropriately and also when to take a step back.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So the next question is: do you use drone for bird shots in flight?
Well, I avoid drones for bird shots and flights. Usually we try and avoid anything that we feel has dangerous impact on birds. I know of instances overseas in the past where people have flown drones which has kind of crashed into birds and have had serious consequences. So I would say avoid or fly at a distance where you don't spook them. But can you do it? Yes, you can do it. But
just take the precaution.
allow an expert to do it. I mean,
Okay.
See, the problem with some of these aspects is, when I talk about ethics is, when I show people that I'm doing something, people might think it's okay for them to do it as well. But then, like I said, there's a lot more that goes into how some of these films are being filmed. So, just be a little cautious.
Okay, the next question is very interesting. Why my dog pupils look so scary on photo? Why my dog's pupils look so scary on photos, but your animal's eyes look so good?
Well,
Any tips on that?
I think if you can give enough time your dog to feel as comfortable as possible when you're taking those pictures, then the chances are their pupils will not dilate, or there will not be much reactions in the pupils, so you probably get a better, more calm, cool image of your dog. Also depends, it's not fair, every dog is different, every pet is different, so some dogs are very sensitive. No matter what you do, they're always going to be sensitive, right?
Yes.
So yeah, but my only suggestion is, just calm them down as much as possible before you take a photograph.
Okay. Now, so I think we have come down to the last two questions for this session, and the second last question is: animals since very near, are you using a zoom lens, or how many meters apart? I mean, are the animals in safari? I think just now we talked about the reasonable distance, so perhaps you can also share with us, what is the good distance and things like that.
Well, we do use long lenses. We use lenses all the way from like a 600 mm lens, which is available in the market today, and then we have also teleconverters, which can kind of multiply or give you a more zoomed in effect. Also with all the latest cameras, cameras are getting better and better. Now we have 60 megapixel cameras, 100 megapixels cameras, so also gives you the flexibility to crop in. So when you crop in, you kind of get a feeling that the animal is more closer to you. Except for Africa, except for the Africa images that you saw on my slides, pretty much everything else is on foot. I'm not a big fan of safari photography because I find it very boring, because you're just sitting in a jeep and just shooting everything you see. I'm more of an explorer. I like to go, out, trek, and find these animals. So that's why I like Southeast Asia a lot more, because it's more hard work, but it's in the process I'm learning as well, because and the experience is very different than just sitting in a jeep and shooting. So so yes, it's a combination of all kinds of lenses. Yeah.
Okay, great. The last questions, could you say the country for the sunset sunrise again, please?
I'm sorry, could you say
The country for the sunset sunrise?
Okay, I don't know what he she means by the country for the sunset. My favorite place to shoot sunrise and sunset is Passaris Park, but otherwise, it doesn't matter which country you are in. As long as you have a good understanding of where the sun rises and have a good understanding of habitat and location, you can make. Some of my best sunrise shots have been in Japan, because the landscape is different, especially during winter. It's all snow, so the colors turn out different. Africa, I've got amazing sunrises and sunsets, and you'll be surprised. We have some amazing sunrises and sunsets in Singapore.
Hey, all right. Thank you so much. I think the biggest takeaway today I have is actually, one thing, if you really want to do good in this, practice makes perfect. And and follow him on Instagram as well, right? So he has really, really amazing photos around.